We learned a lot about ego.
That's a big advantage that some of these smaller companies can offer and be able to stay competitive.
We just had to adapt. He's like, we had to see where opportunities were in that market and what people wanted. And he's like, we just changed.
People are getting to a point where they're craving that authenticity. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the NextGen Strategies Podcast. I should say the final episode of season 2. Just kidding, we're not. It's not like we're going anywhere. We'll be back for season 3. But super excited today to kind of, Ty and I thought it'd be good to end the season on doing a little bit of a recap of the season. Talk through some of the things that we learned from some of the amazing guests that we've been able to have on. Some key takeaways, themes that we seem to see where there were successes, and even some themes that oftentimes maybe led to failure, within some of these businesses, and kind of what those learning points have been. So we're going to go through all this today. We're going to do our best to, recap these, put some certain ideas together. And I think, Tyler, I'm going to let you kick off one of the first kind of themes, main topics that we had for some of our takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. Heck of a season. We went a lot of places. The first one we kind of wanted to talk about that was hit hard this season is multi-generational businesses and how that can be hard. I think the easy thing to think about multi-generational businesses is that, how hard could it be? You walked right into a running business, right. And then you start to look at statistics on multi-generational businesses. And, Jamie McGregor is a great example with McGregor Metalworking in his episode about how there is this generational curse to a certain extent of these businesses not performing as well or ceasing to exist even as they proceed through the generations. So I think we learned a lot about what that process looks like. I think we learned a lot about ego, humility, differences of thinking and as they transition through those businesses. But, we learned that, it is not as easy as what people may think. And one thing that I really took home from it, and one thing I wanted to know while we talked to these multi-generational businesses, is what that looks like for entering that type of business. And when I say that, I specifically mean, did you start working there when you were 12 years old and then just always worked there and then became the CEO? Right. Or what did it look like? And in both instances with both Chemical Corporation and McGregor, the individuals we interviewed had careers outside of the family business after either graduating high school, college, whatever you want to call it, and then returned to the business with their newfound skill set, which I thought was really telling. I think all of them may have had some experience working in that family business, especially when they were younger. But what you saw was kind of these, and I wouldn't say they're a family policy, but you hear that a lot, family policy of go work somewhere else first. And A, to figure out if you even want to work here, and B, to go learn something different. And I think what that does is brings in kind of this fresh perspective into the business.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think the people who, I guess maybe I should say the businesses who are continuing to do this, each iteration of the generation has looked a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're going to talk about adaptability here in a little bit, but I think that was also something where, yes, you may have walked into an existing business that was there, maybe that had been there for a couple of years, but every generation had to learn and re-earn the trust of, whether it was the customers, maybe there's been legacy customers who now had to meet, the son or daughter or the next generation that was coming in, reestablish those relationships, or a lot of times what even probably was harder was regaining the trust or gaining the trust of the folks who had been working for maybe mom and dad before, and then they came into a position of leadership and being able to figure out, kind of surround themselves with the right people and keep a strong culture going, which both of them touched on the fact of how important culture was.
Yeah. And, no career is had in business without having your own crisis. Whether it was COVID or it was the, 08 crisis, you're when you say earn it from a cultural standpoint, but also probably earn it from what we didn't hear a single story of, oh, we just, walked in and it was just churning and printing money from, there's something they had to get through that was unique to them in that leadership position.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I think the other next one that we also were taking away was that relationships are so important in business, and that will beat the large competitors every single time when we're talking about these, small to mid-sized businesses. And I think, one of the things that sometimes people will get misconstrued, or people would think, well, the big businesses are the ones that are they're super successful. And if you're comparing one business to another, like the big business is going to win because oftentimes they're maybe more price competitive. And I think what we're really starting to see now is like, and for the good, I think consumers are still looking for really, really strong relationships and service. While I think there is a lot to be said for automation and, customer or companies making things super seamless from a customer experience standpoint, like you still, especially in business to business relationships, a service company to somebody, who makes a manufacturer, or, even like in the construction field, like relationships are really what matters. And I think, I feel like that was a theme that was through everything, like, because when things were great, those relationships were strong. And when things were bad, having a good relationship ultimately sometimes saved the business, because, it's a lot easier to tell somebody you have a good relationship with that something went wrong and you bumped your head, because you know that you've already got some of that equity. And I think a lot of times that is what has really helped keep some of these generational legacy businesses going. I think about, as we were talking with the Kimmel brothers, and they're obviously as a cleaning company, doing uniforms, mats, like they're competing with some national, international, publicly traded companies. And at the end of the day, like they oftentimes are winning because they do what they say they're going to do, and they take care of the customers, especially when things are getting tough for the customer. And we talked about, what things looked like for them for COVID, and like how they were able to, adapt and do the things that they needed to do. And they were able to be more nimble, more responsive, and ultimately make sure they kept those relationships at the forefront. And I think, the other thing that we talked about, we talked with Mo Carpenter, who is a realtor out of the Springfield area. And he talked about like, listen, man, like I didn't really even hardly do a lot of marketing when I started my business. Like it was me just relying on the relationships and the relationship equity that I had built over a certain period of time. And when I had said, hey, I'm making this jump into, real estate full time, and this is what I have a passion for, and I love people, he didn't really have to do a lot of marketing out of the gate, because he could just be himself and rely on those personal relationships he's had. Now, granted, he ended up doing some pretty cool things in that episode where we talk about the video and stuff that he did. But he grew his business purely off of relational equity. And I think for all the things, and this is coming from the marketing guy, when you talk about being able to do paid advertising and all these other marketing initiatives, your fastest way to growing your business is going to be those referrals and those existing relationships. So I think that's been a theme that we have seen definitely throughout all these different interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's room to compete, not just on price.
Yeah.
And we've seen that over and over again in this season.
Yep.
The kind of the next topic too is just all the stories we heard about adaptability and really how adaptability was required from a survival standpoint. The one that comes to my mind first, because I thought it was a very compelling story, was Sean at Ride One Power Sports. Yep. I think if I remember back on the clip, they were like the top second highest,
one of the largest.
I think they were the second largest dealership in their category in the nation.
Yep.
And then like 2008 hit, and they dropped like 50, 60, 70% overnight. And he just said, yeah, we just had to adapt. Like, he's like, we had to see where opportunities were in that market and what people wanted. And he's like, we just changed, And behind the scenes, we got, a nice tour of the place. And that whole thing was adaptability. I mean, he had rooms where
100%.
there used to be a tech setup of phone lines everywhere, and how things have changed from mail order catalog to this and that. You heard it with the huge industry for adaptability was McGregor metalworking too, and looking into robotics and this and that. I mean, every person we talked to had kind of a story about how they had to pivot. And that even comes back to what me and your episodes have been about, talking a lot about AI and stuff like that. We're just in that scene again. It's just going to be a time to adapt and pivot and change.
Yeah, and I think that the successful business just accept that business is always going to change. Like if you come in as an entrepreneur or leader and you're like, listen, I just want to get it set up and get it perfect and then we can make it run. Like it's not going to happen. And I even think about, Chris Haynes, who built his business literally out of just listening to customer problems and figuring out what it is that customer needed. Now, he had, from a software side, some things that he did to help these companies, but at the end of the day, he didn't sell anything out of a box. He sold consulting and problem solving, and
he still does.
Yeah,
and it's like whatever problem that they have, he's like, I guess we can figure out how to solve it.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, and absolutely. I think that's where a lot of the success with a lot of these businesses has come from, is just on that piece, and leads us into our next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, this kind of sustainability, right? Sustainable growth oftentimes beats fast growth. We've had, especially way back to season 1, so many conversations about how fast growth can kill companies from a culture standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, from a deliverable, whatever it is, product quality. And we kept hearing that story we heard it with the Kimmel brothers. We heard it with Jamie. We heard it with Chris. That they were like, we want to grow in a safe and sustainable manner. Chris was very heavy into that conversation of why not, chase down the big next thing. And he's like, well, I got all these people to take care of, and I want their jobs to be good jobs, and I want the work we do to be valuable to everyone. And then, Jamie talked about his story of chasing down a revenue goal and how it was the worst mistake he's ever made, just chasing a vanity metric. I thought it was incredible to kind of hear that. Especially when you think like multi-generational legacy businesses, like that's part of what kept them in the game this long, is that. And a lot of times when you're working in these businesses or you're about to be a leader in these businesses, you're gun-ho. You want to see big change, big performance. And you got a couple people in the back who are like, take it easy. And there's reason to it. Now, like I said, we just said you got to adapt. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But in today's day and age, everyone's chasing a big exit, a big number, a big this or that. And it's a lot of vanity.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yes, 100%. And I think, vanity, you mentioned that, I think that even that kind of ties into this next one, which is really, authenticity is really becoming a competitive advantage in a lot of different ways. And I think I see this a little bit more towards the marketing lens than anything, and brand. Authenticity obviously goes with having strong relationships like we just talked about. But the other piece of that is you as authentic as you are as a small to mid-sized business, into what your culture is, who your people are, your brand differentiators, like why you do what you do. That is really shining through, and that is what is becoming, what keeps a lot of these businesses going and what helps from a marketing standpoint. We talked with the AR marketing folks around, how sometimes even bad content is going viral now. And they talked about, the less polished stuff is sometimes what performs the best, is because people are getting burned out, right? Like if you're scrolling on social media, or if you're on, Chat GPT and figuring things out, or Claude or Gemini, Google, whatever you're searching for, like there's so much of this canned, polished, very similar cadenced content that's out there. And I think people are getting to a point where they're craving that authenticity. They're craving the brands who have real people, real stories. And I think, that's a big, big advantage that some of these smaller companies can offer and be able to stay competitive. We even talked about on LinkedIn. And I think we even had a full episode where I talked about LinkedIn and social selling, and how you can be a little bit different, and how you have all these AI bots that are sending you messages constantly, and how annoying that is, and how damaging that is to a brand when you are employing those types of tactics and measures versus, the types of reach outs on LinkedIn where you're genuinely asking somebody a question. I mean, we've talked about this probably before, but even to get, folks on these podcasts, like I don't just reach out with a canned message to every single person on LinkedIn who I've been able to research and come across and want to talk to. Like, I try to reach out to them with something very relevant. Like, this is what we're doing. This is who we are. Here's some examples of what we've done before. I'm interested in you because of X, Y, Z, and we would love to have that conversation. And that is the type of stuff that resonates with people because, you take the time, you look at their interests, you look at their business, and while AI may be able to expedite some of that, like that authenticity is what's going to show through from a sales standpoint. And, you got to continue to do that. And you got to be able to just double down, triple down if you're doing that. And then I think that's going to help you from a brand, from a marketing standpoint moving forward.
Yeah, I correlate it with effort, just like putting in effort, because that is like the easy thing with automation and technology and all that is like you can touch a million things really fast and we're all getting inundated with it. And when you see somebody put in a little effort to be a real person,
right,
it's refreshing.
You're right.
Right. That's, I think we're going to continue to crave that. And I think it's going to continue to create market opportunities in any business to be the people who care, the people not chasing big numbers, and there's going to be space for you in that market.
Yes. Yeah.
100%. So we also have, just leadership thoughts in general, right? So, especially when it comes to like leadership gets really hard when there's pressure, right? And we've heard several stories, about like how things are, going along swimmingly. Like when business is good, problems are small, there's, and life is on, easy mode. And then when, you lose a big client, I think that was in Jamie McGregor's episode, a huge contract, or you have an economic cycle like COVID or who knows what, right? The great financial recession. That's when the going gets tough, and that's where you see these leaders shine. And probably that's where you see businesses fail, and we didn't talk to those people. It's because the leadership really wasn't there during that. And you do see that. I mean, business ownership stats are there for a reason. Why businesses, make it 5 years and close is probably because that's pretty close to an economic cycle, and you do see that a lot. And it peeks through in the episodes and the people we talked to this year that, when the going got tough, they leaned into their people and their network. And then you combine it with a lot of the other talking points we had before, then they pivoted and were adapting and tried to be sustainable. And that kind of all protected them through that process. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of just even leadership characteristics of when things get tested during pressure, because we had a lot of like authentic stories around like when things were bad and what kind of how they reacted, good or bad, and how they got through them. And I'm reminded of like even Nathan Stuckey when he talked about having a very kind of calm demeanor and leadership style, and where he equated a lot of things to sports, where you're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs, but the ones that are successful are the ones that can kind of keep that consistent presence, that consistent effort, that rallying point for a team. And I think that that's one thing that I definitely noticed from a lot of these folks that we talk to and have been in these leadership roles, is that they handle adversity well. They are, they sometimes can anticipate it. They know when their team needs them and the questions that are going to come. And I think that being able to have a certain level of empathy and authenticity, even back to what we were just talking about with your internal culture, with your employees. Don't try to hide all the problems from your employees. Sometimes your greatest solutions are going to come from your folks. And that as a leader, you should be thinking about, how do I put somebody on my team in position to be successful, to help, a lot of times you've hired folks in certain roles to be expert in certain things. And so even when times are tough, you as a leader can be their rallying point, but you also don't be afraid to be like, hey, like I got to rely on you for this, and this. And I think that we saw that with a lot of these companies as well.
I've seen a lot of leaning into the problem and putting their head down and getting through a solution, because, as a business leader or owner, you can't implode. That's it, and the stuff is not for the weak, just know your, struggles will be there and they will come. And I think that perseverance is really what pushed many of them through.
Yeah. And I think just a final kind of point here is, as we've especially in this season, even the last season, everybody that we've talked to, like, we've nailed down some of these different key points, some of these key takeaways today. I think kind of a last one that is kind of an overwhelming thing that we heard from every single person was the companies that prioritized good people in their organizations and strong cultures are what made it. Like, there wasn't anything where I had some innovative product or service that blew up overnight and all of a sudden we were blah, blah, blah. It wasn't, oh, well, I, got into a customer and this happened, there's all success. Every single person we talked to pointed back to their people, their culture, the processes they had in place. And so I think that is important for anybody who, sometimes there is a want or a need to maybe hire on the person who is, just unbelievably skilled and has the best resume in the world. And while sometimes that's a need, I think oftentimes it's also just as important to make sure you've got the right people on your team, people who are reflective of you as a leader, people who, honor and respect the culture that you're building and treat your customers the way that you want to see them be treated. So I think that was the other overwhelming topic that we saw as well, as just be good people and employ really good people as well.
I mean, if any of you have, they listen to this, anybody can like think of their like mainstay rock star employees. And what's interesting about them, you said it in a previous episode, but when it came to hiring, like hiring for the intangibles.
Yeah.
And because like what you'll find is these like super rock star employees like just pivot. It's like they care and like they'll find their path inside the business. And I've seen it even through my leadership career before I started my business, of someone who went from an internal bookkeeper to then they directed a department that did social services. Then they ended up helping with IT, like because they were a career person, and then they just were like, wherever I can help. I was actually just talking to a colleague last night who was like, when I started working at the firm that I worked at, I just like looked for problems and how I could help, and like he's like, it definitely fast tracked my development there, because I was like, oh look, this is a gap, and I filled it. And who those people are. And I think that's the ones you really want to lean into during all of these processes.
Yep. 100%. Well, thank you everybody again for joining us this season and for this episode. Like I said before, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break here in the next coming months. Tyler's got another little one even on the way too. And you're going to have some vacations going on this summer as well. So yeah, we're really looking forward. Season 3 is going to be an even better one. We got even some more guests that we're working on getting lined up here. Another, group of stories, some practical tips and advice. And yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I guess everyone's going to have to just listen to like, Motley Crue or some like good music during the summer instead of us yapping about business, right?
Podcast is taking a break. So there you go. Well, thank you everybody. Till next time, our next episode will be in season 3. We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in to the NextGen Strategies Podcast, where we share real stories and practical strategies to help you grow your business. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to like and share it on all of our social media channels.